Most people, by the way, Kim, forget that the anthrax scare of September 2001 was the real domestic terrorism event of 2001. We talk about 9/11, but we don't talk about 9/28. And we should. We should be talking about the anthrax scare because that's when the Department of Defense actually attacked the American people and killed American citizens with a bioweapon called anthrax. That's a terrible thing, and we don't ever talk about it. But what came to our attention in the spring of 2001, so this was months before the anthrax alleged outbreak, was a purchase order by the Department of Defense for 300 million doses of ciprofloxacin. Now, Kim, most people don't know, but Cipro was the drug that you used to treat anthrax poisoning. Now, anthrax, as a practical matter, is a disease that affects hide tanners. You heard what I said, hide tanners, like people who work with leather.
Right, right.
Now, I don't know in what universe we were expecting 300 million people to be suddenly tanning hides in the great buffalo hunt of 2001. Like, what the heck that was about feels like it's odd. But in May of 2001, the United States Army ordered from Bayer 300 million doses of drug that would never be used. I happened to raise a question going, hold on a minute. Why is Bayer getting a contract for 300 million doses of a drug that we've never used? What are we planning on doing? And not surprisingly, in late September, when all of a sudden there's an anthrax outbreak, you sit there and go, okay, well, how did the Department of Defense know that we needed to get 300 million doses of the drug to treat a thing 5 months before the thing actually became a thing? Not unlike this whole COVID nonsense, it became very clear that the Department of Defense knew something. And I happen to have, because of my background with the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology and my work at the various forts that do bioweapons programs, I happen to know where the anthrax lab was because I happened to be in the anthrax lab. That's how I knew where it was. So I knew that the weaponization of anthrax was happening. And so when it started being circulated in late September, I knew what it was. And ironically, at that point in time, several senators reached out to me and said, listen, we think that this might be an inside job. And we think that Bayer as a corporation might be involved in it. And we think that the Department of Defense might be involved in it. So what do you know? And what ensued was over the next 2 years, we provided all the evidence for the fact that this was an inside DOD job. We provided that to the Congress. We provided that to a number of investigators. And as you know, finally, after years of hand-wringing and trying to figure out the whodunit, we finally named a U.S. person affiliated with the federal labs who actually was the person who was blamed for the anthrax outbreak. Now, the fact is, and anybody looking at history knows, that the anthrax outbreak was not an act of a lone wolf. It was a plan so that we could pass the PrEP Act. And the PrEP Act was necessary to essentially suspend constitutional protections when there was a bioemergency, which is what we've just lived through. I warned that that would happen in 2003. In 2004, as an official participant in the bioweapons investigations in Slovenia, when I was asked by the United States government to go over, and that was by the Office of the President, to go over and be a representative for the Eurotox conference in Slovenia. When I was over there, I talked about the fact that we were preparing for self-inflicted bioweapons attacks on the United States. And I was briefing that. And obviously, 1 year later, not surprisingly, we had the coronavirus selected by DARPA and by MITRE to be the technology for biowarfare, which is what we've just lived through.